The United States has come under fire for violating the voting rights of minorities. UN human rights expert Fernando Varenas has denounced measures in some parts of the United States. Varenas says the measures may undermine democracy by denying millions of people belonging to visible minority groups the equal right to vote. He made the comments on the final day of a 2-week official visit to the U.S. He referred to the recently adopted voting law in the U.S. state of Texas, which denies people from minority groups their right to vote. The Varenas said Texas legislation has resulted in gerrymandering and the dilution of voting rights of ethnic minorities in favor of white people. Texas added 2 million Latinos to its population in the 2020 census, and yet state Republicans have still found a way to gerrymander and avoid adding districts that represent this growth. Overall, 55 million eligible voters live in states with new anti-voter laws limiting access. Many of the post-pandemic voter laws will be tested for the first time in 2021. Varenas called for a new deal to prevent the increasing exclusion and discrimination, and also to attack hate speech and hate crimes experienced by minorities.
Well, look, I personally think it's quite absurd for the U.S. to be lecturing anybody about civil liberties and human rights. And while I'm prepared to concede that the special rapporteur from the UN may have the best of intentions, I also tend to the view that it's rather naive to imagine that new legislation, which is not of a constitutional nature, can do anything to alleviate the current problem.
He further said there are many contradictions in the protection of minority rights in the U.S., adding that many of the laws in this area were first drafted in the 1960s and are now showing signs of fatigue. Varenas said after the cases causing deaths of several African Americans, such as George Floyd, happened in the U.S., people have noticed that African Americans are among the most marginalized minorities in the country and are by far the most likely to be denied the right to vote, to be incarcerated, to be the targets of hate speech, and to be excluded in a number of other areas. He also expressed deep concern at sentencing disparities and incarceration rates for minorities in the criminal justice system, which he said created a generational cycle of poverty in a legal system that is set up to the advantage of the wealthy. The comments came after the U.S. was included for the first time on a list of backsliding democracies, in part due to a slew of state legislations passed in recent months that make it harder for some voters to cast their ballots.
I and many other people take the position that the official legal position enshrined in the Constitution really only pays lip service to the issues, and even then, if we concede some degree of commitment, of course, it only deals with a very narrow slice of cases which are able to be shepherded all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The reality is that these issues of discrimination are dealt with not by the judicial branch of state, but rather by the bureaucratic branch of state.
The Stockholm-based institute says a historic turning point came in 2020-2021, when former President Donald Trump questioned the legitimacy of the 2020 election results in the United States. It refers to the campaign by the former president and his allies to overturn the 2020 U.S. election results, which culminated in Trump's supporters storming the seat of the U.S. legislature on January 6th. For years, the United States has been readily quick to point the finger at other countries and highlight alleged crimes against humanity. This claim is almost always followed by subsequent plans to militarily invade a country, usually in the Middle East or Africa, to install the U.S. version of so-called democracy. The irrefutable fact is, the U.S. is in no moral position to speak about crimes against humanity until it gets its own house in order. The U.S. simply must prioritize ending once and for all the systematic killing of black men, women, and children at the hands of police officers, and bring about swift restorative justice to black communities which deserve nothing less.